The letter came folded thrice, sealed with wax too fine for a drifter. It smelled faintly of pine smoke and hay. Clara thumbed the envelope open by firelight, her cracked fingers trembling against the parchment. Miss Clara Boone, it began in a slanted, careful script. I seek a woman not for flirtation, but for partnership. I have land, cattle, and a roof that needs softening. I do not drink. I do not strike. You'll have your own room till you say otherwise. No signature, only a name inked at the bottom like a verdict. Eldon Rusk. She folded the letter and stared at the flames. Snow gusted along the cabin door. Her brother hadn't come home from the war, hadn't written since Shiloh. Her mother had died beneath an overturned stove the year before, the smell of burnt beans still clinging to the rafters. There was nothing left to lose. 2 weeks later, she stepped off the stage at Dry Well. She wore her mother's brooch at her throat, and the hard, hollow patience of a woman who'd had too many years, scraped thin by men's choices. But no one came for her. Not that day, not the next. She slept in the livery's hayloft, brushing horseflies from her hair, waiting. When the boy who ran the feed trough came up to stare at her bare feet, she showed him her teeth and tucked the shotgun closer to her side. By dusk of the third day, she walked the 5 miles east toward Rusk Land. Dust swirled in the gullies. Distant cattle bleated over bone-dry hills. She passed a charred barn and a sagging fence line. By the time she reached the ridge where the house stood, her boots had worn blister-deep. But the house was quiet. The barn, though, was not. She heard rustling inside, low, human breath, creak of a cot that hadn't belonged there in years. Clara stepped through the shadowed mouth of the barn with her shotgun raised. He slept with one boot off, one hand on his belt buckle. Face turned toward the slats, back rising and falling like the tides had forgotten him. He looked young but not soft, beard the color of cedar, jaw set even in sleep. She didn't speak. She simply cocked the shotgun. He woke instantly, rolled, and pulled a knife. They stared at each other in the dusk. "You Rusk?" she asked. He blinked. "You Clara Boone." Her hand didn't lower. "Was supposed to meet you Tuesday," he said, voice low. "Got jumped out past Coyote Creek. Took a bullet to the thigh and got stripped clean. Been sleeping in the barn since." "House locked." He looked shamed. "Don't go in, not since Ma died. Can't stand the smell." She took a slow step closer, lowered the shotgun but didn't ease her stare. "You got land?" "Yes, ma'am." "Cattle?" 15 head, 2 mules, one of them stubborn." "You still want a partner?" He nodded. "Then get up," she said. "I'm not sleeping in this barn unless you plan to build me a loft." He rose stiffly, favoring one leg. She saw the dark stain beneath his trouser and knew the wound hadn't been cleaned right. He swayed. "I'll walk," he said. "You'll limp," she corrected. "Where's your kettle?" He blinked again. She moved past him, started gathering tinder from the barn's lean-to. "If I'm to be your wife, I'll need to boil water. If I'm to be your partner, I'll need a clean house. If I'm to be neither, you best ride back to town and find the whore who'll take your soft-spoken half-apologies." He watched her without speaking. And as night dropped full over Rusk Land, the barn light glowed through the slats like a lantern held against the dark. By dawn, the house windows were open. And by noon, the sheriff was knocking. "You two were seen together," he said, squinting under his hat. "Sleeping under one roof, folks are talking." Clara met the sheriff's eyes. Her hands were wet with lye soap. Her sleeves rolled past the elbow, revealing forearms cut with old work scars. "We married last night," she said. Eldon stepped up beside her, silent, sturdy as a fence post. "Wasn't the barn no preacher," the sheriff said. Only needed fire and promise, Clara answered. That afternoon, the town clerk made a formal entry. Mrs. Clara Rusk, née Boone. And Dry Well began to whisper. Not about the marriage, but about the woman who'd moved into the ruined Rusk house and lit a fire before noon. Who cleaned blood off a cowboy's leg with her teeth clenched and her eyes steady. And who, without any man's help, broke the neck of a rabid coyote at dusk with the same shotgun she'd married with. The whispers didn't stop for months. And in that time, a great many things began to shift under the dust. The wind clawed at the shutters for 3 nights straight. Clara didn't sleep much, but she didn't pace either. She worked. She pulled up rotted floorboards in the parlor and laid down tarred canvas to keep the damp from bleeding back up. She burned the curtains, hauled the rugs out to the creek and beat them against stones until they bled dirt. Every nail she drove into wood, she counted in silence. Eldon limped out mornings and came back bloodied, not from cattle. He was tracking something. Clara could see it in the way he returned, hat slung low, rifle near spent, clothes torn by more than mesquite. He didn't speak of it. She didn't ask. They lived close but apart. Nights he'd sleep in the barn still, stubborn about his stink, or perhaps afraid of sharing a roof without words spoken proper. He brought her the mule's saddle one morning and said, "Needs a woman's hands to mend it," then turned and left before she could speak. By the second week, she found a rusted lockbox under the hearthstones. Inside, a woman's ring, cracked with greenish age, and a bundle of dried flowers pressed between 2 pages of a book about Kansas law. She kept the ring, buried the book. On a dry Tuesday, Eldon returned with blood on his collar and a stranger behind him. "This here's Thad Granger," he said, nodding toward the man who followed. Thad was tall and too clean. His coat had real buttons. His horse was glossy, not just brushed but groomed. He didn't look at Clara the way the town men did, but he didn't look away either. "Came to buy the West Ridge," Eldon said. "Wants to fence it for sheep." Clara turned back to the pot she was stirring. Beans again, but she'd slipped wild onion and the last of the salt pork into it this time. "You selling?" she asked. "Thinking on it," Eldon answered. Clara dipped the ladle once more, tasted the broth, then set the spoon down and walked out without another word. She went past the barn up the slope to the western rise. The wind came easier up there. From that height the land unfolded like a quilt torn and restitched, scrub brush, mesquite, the dry shimmer of a creek pretending to sleep. She stood there until her shadow stretched long behind her, then she walked back. Thad Granger was still there. "You've made supper," he said as she passed him in the yard. She stopped. "I don't cook for strangers," she said. "That's wife's work." His mouth twitched. "You claiming the title, ma'am. I'm claiming the fire." That night they ate in silence. Thad left with the moon high, and Eldon didn't speak again until he stood to pour water on the hearth. "He'll offer twice what it's worth," he said. "Then it's worth more than twice," Clara replied. They didn't speak of it again. Weeks passed like that, dry mornings, hard work, silence broken by breath and hoofbeat. Clara stitched the saddle, gutted the pantry, dug up the stumps behind the house one by one. Eldon watched from a distance, mending fence, rehanging gates. He let her lead and she let him watch. Then one morning she found tracks behind the barn, barefoot, human, small. She followed them to the root cellar and found the door ajar. Inside was a girl. Thin as a fence slat, cheeks sunken, hair like straw left too long in the rain. Maybe 10, maybe 12. She had a tin knife in her hand and dried jerky in the other. She froze when she saw Clara, then bared her teeth and hissed. Clara didn't flinch, just stepped forward slow. "You hungry or hiding?" she asked. The girl didn't answer. Clara sat down on the dirt floor, knees creaking. Waited. The girl crept closer, then closer, until finally she leaned her head on Clara's shoulder and slept like the dead. They named her Mercy. She wouldn't speak for the first 5 days. Ate everything she could catch, field mice, dead birds, spoiled apples from the orchard stump. Clara taught her how to boil water, how to skin the rabbits proper. Eldon built her a cot in the corner room and left her alone. Mercy didn't seem afraid of him, but she didn't trust his hands near her either. Then one dusk, Eldon came back bloodier than before, his shirt torn open, long gashes across his ribs. Clara sat him down without a word and poured whiskey across the wounds. He bit down on a leather strap and didn't scream. "I know who it was," he said through his teeth. "Who?" "Granger's men. They were poking fence line on my father's side, trying to scare me off. One of them had a brand from Carson territory. I've seen it before." Clara tied the last bandage tight. "You plan to let it be." Eldon looked at her, eyes darker than usual. "I'm tired of letting." That night, Clara sharpened her knife on the porch, while Mercy sat at her feet, humming a song neither of them knew the words to. The land had chosen sides, and dawn would not come quietly again. The first shot came just after midnight. It didn't strike the house, it struck the barn. A crack, then a low whoomp as dry hay caught flame. The night lit up yellow, and the cattle screamed like dying things. Clara was out the door before Eldon had lifted his rifle. Mercy was faster. Barefoot, she ran with a bucket before either adult could stop her. Clara caught her by the arm before she could cross the fence. "You want to die for a barn." Mercy looked up. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Only the look, a pleading, feral flash that split Clara in two. So they put the fire out together. 3 buckets passed hand to hand, smoke choking every breath. By dawn, the barn was blackened and steaming but still standing. Eldon found the bullet casing lodged in a support beam. A long one, buffalo rifle, not Granger's usual kind. "This wasn't a warning," he said. "They're trying to ruin us quiet, starve us, cut fences, spook the herd, then offer money when we're desperate." Clara nodded. She was sitting in the ashes, pulling nails from scorched boards with bare hands. Her fingers bled, but she didn't stop. That night she wrote a letter, folded it clean, addressed it to no one. She sealed it, tucked it under a floor plank, and said nothing to either of them. The next morning she dressed for town. Eldon stopped her at the gate. "You know they won't help," he said. "They won't," she agreed, "but they'll see me, that's enough." She rode the mule into Dry Well with her head high, sleeves rolled, collar pinned shut. The brooch at her throat had gone tarnished, but she wore it still. She didn't stop at the general store or the feed shop. She went to the saloon. The saloon was full of men. Granger among them. He was playing cards, a cigar clenched in his teeth, boots up on the corner of the table like nothing in the world had ever told him no. Clara walked in. Every head turned. She crossed the floor without breaking stride. No one spoke, not even the barkeep. She stopped at Granger's table, looked down at the man who had sent cowards with fire and long guns to ruin what she was building from ash. "You'll leave us alone," she said. Granger looked up, tilted his head. "Beg your pardon." "You heard me." "I heard a girl with soot on her boots and a broken-down name try to bark orders in a man's house." Clara bent, slow, until her face was level with his. "You don't scare me," she said. "Not because I'm brave, because I've buried more than one man like you, and I've still got the shovels." He laughed, not a big one, just a chuckle like he didn't think she could touch him. "Your husband know you came here to play outlaw?" he asked. "I'm the one who knows where the bullets are kept." She straightened, turned, and walked out. Granger didn't follow. But that wasn't the end. The second fire came 2 nights later. This time it was the corral. They waited until the moon was gone and the herd had settled. Then something, kerosene, Clara guessed, was splashed along the fence and flame leapt high. They didn't get all the cattle out. 3 died. One was Mercy's favorite, a spotted calf she'd named Dust. Clara found her after dawn, curled up next to the carcass, face blank, like she'd used up every grief she had. They buried Dust on the east side, under a dead sycamore. And that night, Mercy spoke for the first time. "They wore masks," she said. Clara froze. "They came to my old house. My mama was gone. I think they took her first, but I saw them. 2 had red bandanas, 1 had no shoes." Clara touched her shoulder. "You remember which way they went?" Mercy nodded. "Toward the canyon, the one where the rocks look like teeth." Clara had never seen that place, but Eldon had. "There's an old mine out there," he said. "Used to run silver down in the shafts, but it collapsed 20 years back. No one goes near it now." "They do," Clara said, "and they won't stop." So she made her choice. They rode out at dusk, all 3 of them. Left the house empty but locked, the windows shuttered, water drawn and covered. Eldon brought 2 rifles. Clara brought her shotgun and the knife she'd carried from Arkansas. Mercy carried nothing. She rode between them, her eyes fixed forward like she'd already seen the end of it. The canyon loomed at midnight. Jagged rock, no wind, just the hush of waiting things. They tethered the mule low and climbed on foot. The mine mouth yawned open, black and deep. Eldon took point. Clara followed. Mercy crept after, her feet ghost quiet. They found the camp not far in, 3 bedrolls, a rifle against a stone, cans scattered half full, men sleeping like they had no fear left in them. Eldon took the first man. Clara took the second. The third man woke, but only for a second. Mercy picked up a rock and brought it down fast, hard, twice. Then silence. They didn't speak on the way out. They didn't speak for the whole ride home. But something shifted that night. The land stopped fighting them. And the sky the next morning was clear as glass. The first rain came 3 days later. It wasn't much, just a steady, needling drizzle that softened the earth and made the porch boards hiss when it hit. But it was the first they'd seen in weeks, maybe months. Clara let it fall on her face. Eyes closed, mouth still, she stood barefoot in the mud while the storm wet her hair to her scalp. Inside, Mercy was gutting trout Eldon had snared near the ravine. She did it slowly, with care, like the flesh was made of paper. Eldon watched from the doorway, rubbing his side where the wound had finally crusted shut. They didn't say it aloud, but all 3 of them understood the same thing. They passed some point of return. The war wasn't loud now, but it wasn't over. It had gone quiet the way wolves go quiet before the kill. Clara spent the days sealing the barn with new beams, hammering in boards so tight no flame could reach air again. Eldon vanished for long stretches, scouting the ridge, checking Granger's movements. Mercy began sleeping with a knife tucked under her pillow and no longer flinched when the wind rattled the window glass. Then one morning, Clara rode into town again. She wore her work clothes, stiff boots, a patched coat, no corset, and kept the shotgun in a leather sling across her back. She didn't go to the saloon this time. She went to the courthouse. The clerk, a squat man with tobacco-stained hands, looked up when she entered. "Mrs. Rusk," he said, "back again so soon." She slid a slip of paper across the counter. He squinted. "You filing a claim?" "No," Clara said, "I'm naming heirs." He raised a brow. "Eldon ain't dead." "He's not the one I named." The clerk turned the page. His eyes widened just slightly. Mercy Boone Rusk, he read aloud. Clara nodded once. She's not blood, he said. She's more than blood. He didn't argue, just stamped the page and made a second copy for record. By the time Clara returned to the ranch, the air had gone strange. The wind had shifted east, the mule was skittish. Mercy sat on the porch with her knife in her lap and her face turned toward the hills. They're coming, she said. Clara didn't ask how she knew. That night Eldon didn't sleep. He oiled every gun, counted every round. Mercy set up traps along the fence, scrap wire, broken glass, little bells she'd salvaged from the old sewing kit. Clara moved the cattle to the eastern gulch and left the gate open. If they ran, they'd run toward the dry creek, away from the house. The attack came just before dawn. 4 riders, no torches this time, just silence like wolves in brush. Clara saw them first, shapes cutting fast through the sage, coming low. She fired the first shot, took one man off his horse before the others reached the yard. Eldon dropped the second, but the third crashed through the gate and into the barn before either of them could stop him. Mercy ran after. Clara yelled, but the girl didn't slow. Inside it was dark and close, the air still stinking faintly of old smoke. The man had found the lantern and struck a match. The room flared yellow just as Mercy tackled him from behind. He turned, elbowed her hard enough to make her drop, then raised the match again. But Eldon was there. He didn't fire. He tackled the man into the support beam. The lantern fell, oil splashed. The match dropped, and then flame again. Clara dragged Mercy out by the arms, her lungs filling with smoke before she hit air. Eldon didn't come. Not at first. Then he stumbled from the barn's mouth, coughing, eyes wild, arms wrapped tight around a canvas sack. The barn collapsed behind him. He fell in the mud and laughed. Inside the sack, the family deed, the marriage license, the land survey, every paper Granger had ever said didn't exist. They won't touch us now, Eldon said. But Clara was already watching the last rider flee. He didn't make it far. Mercy was the one who shot him, took the rifle from Clara's hands, steadied it against the porch rail and fired once, then sat back down, said nothing. That night they buried the 2 men who died in the yard, didn't mark the graves, didn't speak a word over them. They sat on the porch after, covered in ash and blood and smoke. You ever gonna marry me proper? Clara asked. Eldon looked at her. I thought I did. You asked no vows, you gave no ring. He reached in his pocket and pulled out something small and wrapped in a scrap of cloth. It was the green cracked ring from the hearth box. He held it out. Clara took it, slid it on her finger. It fit. I'll keep the name, she said. You earned it. They sat there until the stars came. And in the yard, Mercy dug her knife into the dirt over and over, etching the shape of a cross she wouldn't let herself forget. The land healed slow. Rain came steadier. The grass grew thicker near the east gulch, and wildflowers pushed up where fire had burned clean. Clara began keeping bees in hollowed casks behind the orchard stump. Eldon built a new barn, lower and stronger, with a stone base and a loft Mercy claimed as her own. No more riders came. Not from Granger, not from anywhere. One morning, Eldon rode out to town to register the new barn under their claim. He returned with news. Granger's gone, he said, tying off his horse. Sold his sheep, his land, everything, left a week back. No one saw where he went. Clara stood beside the well, rope in hand, face unreadable. "Snakes don't walk," she said. "They vanish." Eldon nodded. He didn't press the point. Weeks passed quiet. Mercy grew leaner but stronger. She started tending the southern fence line without being asked, carrying the rifle slung casual like she'd been born with it. She still didn't talk much, but when she did, her voice had weight. She began carving. Small things at first, a sparrow from pine, a pair of mule ears, a horse mid-gallop, then more careful things. She carved a woman once, standing with her hair caught in wind. Clara found it and turned it once in her hands, saying nothing. In July, a letter arrived. Addressed in a shaky hand, from Arkansas. Clara read it on the porch, the sun turning the ink silver in places. When she was done, she burned it in the hearth and went back to her stitching. Eldon didn't ask what it said. Late that month, Mercy saw a figure on the ridge. Too far to shoot, closer than comfort. He didn't move. Just stood there, coat flapping in the wind, hat tipped low. Clara stepped outside. Raised her hand. The figure stood a minute more, then turned and vanished into the heat haze. They kept watch that night, but no one came. 2 weeks later, Mercy found a letter nailed to the fence post near the north lot. The nail had blood on it, no name signed, no words, just a drawing, a coil of rope hanging loose. Mercy brought it inside, set it on the table. "What's it mean?" she asked. Eldon looked at Clara. Clara looked at the flame. "It means they want us to run," she said. "We won't," Mercy said. It wasn't a question. That night, Clara loaded 3 cartridges with her own hands, set them in a cloth wrap, tied them tight, and laid them beneath the floorboard where she'd once hidden her letter. 3 rounds, she said. 1 for warning, 1 for blood, 1 for the end. They trained Mercy on the shotgun next. She didn't miss, not once. September came hard, cold mornings, dry breath. They slaughtered 2 calves and smoked the meat, tied bundles of herbs in the rafters. Mercy dug a root cellar without complaint. Clara preserved peaches and tomatoes until the jars lined every shelf. And one night, while the moon hung orange and low, Mercy came down from the loft holding the carving of the woman. "I think she's you," she said to Clara. Clara took the figure, turned it in her hands. "She might be." "Do you think they'll come back?" Mercy asked. "They always do," Clara said. "The kind that lose power, they don't let go, they fester." "But we're ready now," Mercy said. "We're more than ready." That winter, frost crept down the walls like fingers, but the house stayed warm. The new barn stood steady. The wind howled sometimes, but never got in. And no more strangers came. By spring, folks in Drywell had changed how they looked at the Rusk land. Not with pity, not even with suspicion. With distance. Respect maybe, or fear. The kind of silence towns give to houses that refused to die. Clara was seen less often in town. But when she came in clean boots, a braided rope on her saddle horn, and Mercy at her side, rifle across her back like an extra limb. People didn't whisper anymore. They watched. By the second year, the fence line held firm. The herd doubled. The orchard started throwing fruit again. Eldon fixed the roof of the smokehouse without being asked. Mercy grew taller. Her eyes stayed sharp. And on a quiet morning, Clara stood at the ridge and looked down at the land they had saved. 3 graves lay under the sycamore. One was for dust, the other 2 for men whose names she never bothered to learn. They had come to burn her out. But fire had only tempered her. And when the wind rose behind her, whipping her skirt and hair and the collar of the old patched coat, she didn't turn from it. She let it pass through her and stood tall. She had been a mail-order bride. She had found a man sleeping in her barn. She had lit the match that burned half her past away. And now, under open sky, on land that had been carved with sweat and soaked in blood, she had become something else. Something the town would never name, but always remember. The woman who never ran.